What about you? I mean, there you are in the midst of all of this. You told me off camera that some of these girls, you had seen their faces before. How was that?
Well, you know, Dateline NBC had a special called Kids for Sale in 2003. It's amazing how many people's lives this special actually changed, how many people in Cambodia I met who were there because of it. And it really exposed sex trafficking in Cambodia. When I saw that special, I was literally nauseous for days and so gripped by these girls' faces that I saw that were in a brothel and they were 5 or 6 years old being sold. And so I started praying for them, not just that they would be rescued, but that they would come to know God, that God would heal their lives, like all of these things. Well, it turns out when I'm in Cambodia, many of the girls in this story that I aired today were actually rescued from that very same brothel. They were in the Dateline NBC documentary, and I'm sitting across from them interviewing them at 15, 16 years old, and they're telling me about how they love God, about how God's healing their life, and they were suicidal, but now they have hope and hope for a future. And it was just like the most surreal thing, because there's this little face, but growing up and healing and rescued and everything that I prayed for. And I had the privilege of literally talking to these kids. Like it was standing in the middle of answered prayer.
Wow, what goes around comes around. What about you there? I mean, you're not seeing them on the screen, you're actually there with them, plus you're meeting a lot of younger girls who are just kind of been recently delivered. It must be a heart-churning experience for you.
It was, I would say, heartbreaking.
Yeah.
It was, my heart was already broken for this issue. It was just broken further. And it was really tough to see rescued kids, you know, and know what they'd been through. And they were, I mentioned previously, they were reading their journals to me about what these kids had experienced in detail, showing me pictures of what they had gone through, tied down, and all kinds of horrific things, you know, which was just traumatic to see. The hardest thing was actually meeting kids that are still being trafficked. Yeah. So I went to the village of Svaipak, where many of these kids are sold, and I had pointed out to me, you know, these kids are still being trafficked. They come to our kids club. Some days they can't sit down because they're so sore from how many times they've been raped. And that's when I lost it. I just, it just seemed so wrong that I couldn't grab this kid and run away with them under my arm, you know? But these ministries are working long term in that town, and they're working with the families and teaching them not to sell, and working with the pimps and telling them not to sell little girls, and so it's a long-term thing to save a child, you know. Yeah. But it was that was the most brutal part, and I just think if anybody watching had experienced or seen what I'd seen, they wouldn't be able to sit silently aside. You know, it's really impassioned me to dedicate my life to trying to make a difference in this area.
You know, the scripture talks about the end of days, and one of the things the Lord will be doing, friends, is judging the nations. And sometimes, you know, we kind of disassociate ourselves from pedophiles and other people who are doing horrific deeds around the world. And I understand that. I mean, I do the same. But the point is, they're also fellow Canadians. I mean, these guys are going over there, and this is why this sex trade operates, because these basically imported pedophiles from Canada and the U.S. and Europe and so on are coming in, and they're fueling the trade with the dollars that they pay for these little girls. Well, we have responsibilities as Canadians, at least, you know, to deal with this from a sense of not only national pride, but also our position of faith. And so we've got to think deep about what we should do. And the fact that we're bringing it to you, I think you should take as something from the Lord.